In a small town where everyone knows your name but not all your secrets, a simple act of kindness is about to unravel 5 decades of carefully guarded history. Morgan Hayes isn't your typical small-town mechanic. For 45 years, he's been the guardian angel of stranded motorists, fixing cars for free for those who can't afford repairs. His legendary hands have restored over 10,000 vehicles, earning him a reputation as the Saint of Cedar Grove. But when a broken-down Mercedes rolls into his shop on a crisp autumn morning, he has no idea he's about to face the one person who broke more than just his heart 50 years ago. What follows is the story of how a humble mechanic discovers that his latest charity case is not only a self-made billionaire, but also his first love, and how a simple repair job becomes a chance to fix what time broke apart. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn breaks over Cedar Grove, casting long shadows through the weathered windows of Morgan's auto shop. The morning ritual begins, as it has for nearly half a century. The soft jingle of keys, the creak of the old wooden door, and the familiar weight of his father's leather tool belt settling around his waist. Morgan Hayes runs his calloused fingers over the worn leather, remembering the day his father placed it in his hands. "Take care of people first, son," he'd said, "and the business will take care of itself." The tool belt has grown smooth with age, each scratch and scuff telling a story of its own. The original brass buckle still gleams faintly, though the leather has darkened from years of honest work and motor oil. It's become as much a part of him as the grey in his hair or the laugh lines around his eyes. At 72, Morgan moves, with the deliberate grace of someone who knows every inch of their domain. The workshop smells of metal and memories. Motor oil, yes, but also the lingering scent of coffee from his ancient percolator, and the sweet hint of pine from the air fresheners he keeps hanging by the office door. Some folks say the shop hasn't changed since 1965, and they're not entirely wrong. The same hand-painted sign still hangs outside, though the colors have faded to gentle pastels. The wooden workbench, scarred and stained, holds the same precise arrangement of tools his father taught him to maintain. Morgan flips the switches one by one, bringing the shop to life. Fluorescent lights flicker overhead, illuminating the wall. Of gratitude, his private name for the corkboard covered in thank you cards and faded photographs. Each one represents a person he's helped, a family he's kept mobile, a story he's become part of. He pauses at a recent addition, a crayon drawing from little Sarah Miller, showing her family's restored station wagon with hearts floating above. Her father had lost his job, and the car was their lifeline to interviews. Morgan had fixed it for the cost of parts alone, though he told them even that could wait until things turned around. The radio comes to life with a soft crackle, tuned to the oldies station as always. The Everly brothers drift through the air as Morgan begins his morning inspection. Each tool must be in its place, each diagnostic machine calibrated, each corner swept clean. His father taught him that a clean shop was a sign of a clear mind, and some habits run deeper than time itself. The morning sun streams through the high windows, catching dust motes in golden beams. It illuminates the faded photograph hanging behind his desk, his father standing proudly in front of the shop on opening day, 1965. Morgan remembers that day clearly, though he was just a boy. The shop had seemed enormous then, a cathedral of chrome and steel where miracles happened daily. Now it feels like home, every corner holding echoes of laughter, serious conversations, and countless moments of quiet triumph over mechanical adversity. He settles into the familiar routine, checking the appointment book, though he knows most of his work comes from walk-ins and emergencies. Cedar Grove sits at the intersection of 2 major highways, and broken-down travelers have been finding their way to his door for decades. The local folks know him as the man who's never turned away someone in need, who can coax life back into engines others have declared dead, who remembers not just the cars, but the stories behind them. The coffee percolator gurgles its morning song as Morgan reviews his supplies. He orders only what he needs, keeping prices low so he can help those who need it most. The shelf of special parts, those he's salvaged and restored himself, stands ready for the day's challenges. Each piece represents hours of patient work, usually done in the quiet of evening when the shop is officially closed, but the lights burn late. A gentle knock at the doorframe announces Jimmy's arrival. The young man, barely 25, has been Morgan's assistant for 3 years now, learning not just the mechanics of engines, but the mechanics of compassion that have made Morgan's shop a community landmark. Jimmy's early today, eager as always, his own tool belt still stiff with newness. "Morning, Mr. Hayes," Jimmy calls out, already reaching for the broom. He knows the morning routine as well as Morgan does now. "Saw Mrs. Henderson's Buick on my way in. Might be heading this way. She said it was making that noise again." Morgan nods, already mentally cataloguing the likely causes of Mrs. Henderson's mysterious noise. Her husband had been one of his father's first customers, and Morgan had promised to look after her when Frank passed. It's a promise he's kept faithfully for 15 years, like so many others. The morning light grows stronger, painting the workshop in shades of possibility. Morgan adjusts his tool belt, its familiar weight a reminder of all it represents: tradition, service, the simple dignity of doing good work. Another day begins at Morgan's auto shop, where every repair is more than just fixing a car. It's about keeping promises, preserving independence, and proving that in a world of planned obsolescence, some things are worth saving. Little does Morgan know that this ordinary autumn morning is about to become extraordinary, as fate prepares to test whether his skilled hands can fix not just engines, but the broken pieces of his own past. Mrs. Henderson's Buick rolls into the shop exactly as Jimmy predicted, the familiar squeal of its fan belt announcing her arrival. She emerges from the driver's seat with the dignity of someone who's been navigating life's roads for 8 decades, her silver hair perfectly set despite the early hour. "That noise is back, Morgan," she announces, though they both know this visit is about more than just car trouble. Every other Tuesday, like clockwork, she finds a reason to bring the Buick in. Sometimes it's a rattling that only she can hear. Other times, it's a feeling that something's not quite right. Morgan understands. Since Frank's passing, these visits have become her way of staying connected to a world they once shared. "Let's have a listen, shall we?" Morgan guides her to the small waiting area, while Jimmy brings the Buick onto the lift. The wall of thank you cards catches Mrs. Henderson's eye, as it always does. She contributed quite a few herself over the years, each one carefully written in her precise penmanship. "You know, Frank always said you had magic in those hands," she muses, watching Morgan work. "Said you could hear what a car was trying to tell you." Morgan smiles, making a small adjustment to the belt tension. "Your Frank taught me half of what I know. He used to say every engine has a story. You just have to listen carefully enough." The morning unfolds with its usual parade of regulars. Tom Weber's pickup needs its weekly inspection. He's been babying the old Ford along for 3 years since his retirement, unable to justify a new one on his pension. Morgan keeps it running with carefully salvaged parts and mechanical ingenuity, charging only what Tom can afford. "One of these days I'll settle up properly," Tom always says. But Morgan waves him off. Some debts aren't meant to be paid in dollars and cents. Sarah Miller's mother brings the station wagon in for its promised tune-up. The crayon drawing still holds pride of place on the wall of gratitude, and Morgan takes a moment to show little Sarah how the spark plugs work. Her eyes light up with curiosity, reminding him of another young person who once loved watching engines come back to life. "Maybe she'll take over for you someday," Jimmy jokes. But Morgan sees something in the way Sarah studies the engine. He remembers that same look in Catherine's eyes back when they were young, and the world seemed full of infinite possibilities. The thought of Catherine catches him off guard. He hasn't allowed himself to dwell on those memories in years, though. They're never far from the surface. He busies himself with the miller's car, focusing on the familiar rhythm of routine maintenance. Between customers, Jimmy works on his own project, a demolished Chevy that most would consider beyond saving. Morgan watches the young man's progress with quiet pride. Jimmy has the touch, that innate understanding of machinery that can't be taught. More importantly, he has the heart for the work, understanding that every car that comes through their doors represents someone's hopes, dreams, or memories. The wall clock ticks toward noon as Morgan finishes with the morning's scheduled appointments. Each repair has been more than just a mechanical fix. They're threads in the fabric of Cedar Grove's daily life. The thank you cards on the wall tell stories of first cars kept running for teenagers saving for college, of family vehicles preserved through tough times, of independence maintained for elderly neighbors who'd otherwise be stranded. A young couple arrives with a stroller and a worried expression. Their minivan's transmission is acting up, and they're stretched thin with a new baby. Morgan recognizes the look of people trying to calculate how many meals they'll need to skip to afford repairs. He pretends not to notice the wife wiping away tears as he quotes them a price that's more about kindness than business sense. "We can work something out," he assures them, already planning how to rebuild rather than replace the troublesome parts. Nobody walks in Cedar Grove, not while I'm here. The morning's steady stream of customers reinforces what Morgan has always known. A mechanic's work is as much about fixing people's worries as it is about fixing their cars. Each interaction adds another card to his wall, another story to the shop's legacy, another reason to keep the lights on and the doors open. As the lunch hour approaches, Jimmy steps out to grab their usual sandwiches from the diner across the street. Morgan takes a moment to update his ledger, adding more red ink to the courtesy maintenance column. His accountant would have a fit if he saw how many repairs were logged under that heading, but Morgan learned long ago that some forms of profit can't be measured in dollars. The autumn sun has climbed high enough to warm the workshop when Jimmy returns, bringing with him the usual gossip from the diner. Morgan half listens to the local news, his mind already on the afternoon's work. Neither of them notices the sleek Mercedes that passes by the shop once, then twice, its driver searching for the courage to stop. The Mercedes S-Class makes its third pass, just as Morgan is wiping his hands clean from the minivan repair. This time, the distinctive purr of its engine falters, coughs, and dies altogether, right outside the shop's entrance. It's an elegant machine, its silver paint gleaming in the midday sun, as out of place in Cedar Grove as a peacock in a chicken coop. Jimmy whistles low under his breath. "That's at least $150,000 sitting out there, Mr. Hayes." Morgan says nothing, already moving toward the door. He's been diagnosing engines long enough to recognize the particular way this one failed. Fuel injection system, if he had to guess. Modern cars with their computer systems might be more efficient, but they've lost the honest simplicity of their predecessors. The driver's door opens, and a silk scarf emerges first. Hermes, though Morgan wouldn't know the designer label. It's followed by a woman in her late 60s, elegant despite her obvious frustration. She carries herself with the kind of confidence that comes from decades of commanding boardrooms, though something in her posture suggests unease. "Excuse me," she calls out, her voice carrying a cultured accent that's not quite natural. "I seem to be having some trouble with my—" The word dies in her throat as Morgan steps into the sunlight. For a moment, time performs a curious trick. The years peel away like old paint, and they're both 18 again, standing in this same spot on a summer afternoon in 1973. Her hair was chestnut brown then, not the carefully maintained silver. It is now. His hands were smoother, his shoulders straighter, but her eyes, those haven't changed at all. Morgan recovers first, professional instincts kicking in. Fuel injection system, most likely. These models can be temperamental when they're not serviced regularly. His voice sounds steady, though his heart is doing strange things in his chest. She blinks, composing herself with visible effort. Yes, well, I'm afraid I'm not very knowledgeable about such things. I was looking for a repair shop and I saw your sign. You found one, Morgan says simply, gesturing to Jimmy. Let's get her inside before the sun gets too high. Jimmy, oblivious to the undercurrents, springs into action with the tow bar. The Mercedes rolls into the shop with quiet dignity, its chrome trim catching the fluorescent lights. Morgan notices the license plate, California, as if he needed another reminder of how far their paths had diverged. The woman, he can't quite bring himself to think of her as Catherine yet, follows her car into the shop. Her designer outfit looks even more out of place inside, where honest work and decades of service have left their marks on every surface. She clutches her handbag like a shield, her knuckles white against the expensive leather. I don't suppose you could recommend a hotel, she asks, her voice carefully neutral. The repairs might take some time, I imagine. The Cedar Grove Inn is just down the street, Morgan replies, though they both know there's only one hotel in town. It's not the Ritz, but Mary Beth keeps it clean. He turns to the Mercedes, already lifting the hood. I'll need to run some diagnostics. Jimmy can give you a ride if you'd like. She hesitates, something like disappointment flickering across her features. That's very kind, but I can walk. It's a lovely day, and I remember the way. The last words slip out before she can catch them, and they both pretend not to notice. Morgan focuses on the engine, though his trained eye has already spotted the problem. Jimmy hovers nearby, sensing tension but unsure of its source. I'll have a preliminary assessment for you by this afternoon, Morgan says to the engine compartment. The shop number hasn't changed, if you'd like to call for an update. She makes a soft sound, whether of acknowledgement or something else, he can't tell. Her heels click against the concrete floor, heading toward the door. Just before she exits, she pauses. The shop looks exactly the same, she says quietly, and then she's gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of expensive perfume and the weight of 50 years of unspoken words. Jimmy waits until she's out of earshot before speaking. Want me to start the diagnostic, Mr. Hayes? Morgan straightens up, his old joints protesting. No, I'll handle this one myself. Why don't you finish? Up with the miller's car? He watches through the open door as Catherine makes her way down the street, her elegant figure incongruous against the familiar backdrop of Cedar Grove's main street. She doesn't look back, but her steps aren't quite as confident as they were when she arrived. Morgan turns back to the Mercedes, running his hand along its smooth lines. Machines, at least, are straightforward. They break in predictable ways and can be fixed with the right tools and knowledge. Hearts are trickier, he thinks, especially ones that have had half a century to collect rust. After Catherine's departure, the old radio in the corner crackles to life with a familiar tune, Can't Help Falling in Love by Elvis Presley. Morgan's hands freeze over the Mercedes engine as the music pulls him back to the summer of 1973, when that same song played on this very radio, in this very shop. He was 18 then, working alongside his father during the busiest summer of their lives. The highway expansion had brought a steady stream of travelers through Cedar Grove, and among them was Catherine Mills, 17 and radiant, sitting in her father's broken-down Chevrolet Chevelle. Vapor lock, his father had diagnosed, but let Morgan handle the repair. Show me what you've learned, son. Catherine had watched him work, asking intelligent questions that revealed a mind as sharp as any tool in the shop. She wore a simple blue sundress, her brown hair caught in the workshop's fan breeze. And when she smiled, Morgan forgot every technical term he'd ever learned. You understand all of this? She had asked, genuinely curious rather than condescending. How everything fits together. Cars are honest, young Morgan replied, his hands steady despite his racing heart. They tell you exactly what's wrong if you know how to listen. Her father's impatience had been obvious. A successful businessman, Already climbing the corporate ladder, he saw the repair shop as beneath them, but Catherine had lingered, asking about the vintage Mustang Morgan was restoring in his spare time. "It's a '65, he'd explained, pride overwhelming his usual shyness. "Found it in a junkyard. Dad says if I can fix it up, it's mine." "Could you show me?" she'd asked, and that simple question changed everything. The memory shifts to their first real conversation, sitting in the half-restored Mustang. Catherine had shared her dreams of going to business school, of building something meaningful. Morgan had listened, entranced by her passion, her determination to prove herself in a world that wasn't ready for ambitious women. "Everyone expects me to find a husband and settle down," she'd confided, tracing the Mustang's unfinished dashboard. "But I want more. I want to create something, to make a difference." "You will," Morgan had said with the absolute certainty of young love. "You're the smartest person I've ever met." That summer unfolded like a dream. Catherine's father had business in a nearby city, leaving her with her aunt in Cedar Grove. Every free moment she was at the shop, watching Morgan work, sharing books she thought he'd enjoy, drawing him out of his shell with questions about his own dreams. The radio still sat in its same spot back then, playing the soundtrack to their growing romance. Elvis, the Supremes, Simon and Garfunkel, each song became part of their story. They'd dance sometimes after the shop closed, Morgan's hands clean, but his shirt still smelling of honest work, Catherine's laughter echoing off the old walls. His father had watched their romance with knowing eyes. "Life's not always simple, son," he'd warned one evening. "Sometimes love isn't enough." But young Morgan couldn't imagine anything more powerful than what he felt when Catherine looked at him, when she spoke of their future as if it were already certain. He'd even started sketching plans to expand the shop, thinking of ways to combine her business acumen with his mechanical skills. The memory that cuts deepest is their last good day, just before everything changed. They'd driven the finally restored Mustang to the lake, the late summer sun turning everything golden. Catherine had worn her blue dress again, the one from their first meeting, and a small gold locket Morgan had saved 3 months to buy. "We'll figure it out," she'd promised, but there was something in her voice, a tension he'd chosen not to hear. "Together, we can do anything." The next day, her father announced his promotion and their immediate move to California. Catherine had come to the shop one last time, tears in her eyes, trying to explain about opportunities and family obligations and dreams too big for Cedar Grove. Morgan pulls himself back to the present, his hands resting on the Mercedes' expensive engine. The radio has moved on to another song, but the echoes of that summer still hang in the air. He looks at the modern tools lined up on his workbench, remembering simpler times when all he needed was a socket wrench and the certainty of young love. Jimmy's voice breaks through his reverie. "Mr. Hayes, you've been staring at that engine for 10 minutes. Morgan straightens up, his back protesting the movement. "Just thinking about fuel injection systems," he lies, reaching for a diagnostic tool that didn't exist in 1973. "These new engines, they're complicated things." The words feel hollow in his mouth, because the truth is, in all his years of fixing broken machines, he's never quite figured out how to repair the things that matter most. Morgan pulls his oldest diagnostic tool from the bottom drawer of his toolbox. Not because he needs it, but because its familiar weight in his hands helps steady him. The battered device has been with him since the early 80s, when electronic systems first started appearing in cars. He'd resisted computerized diagnostics initially, just as his father had resisted switching from carburetors to fuel injection. "A good mechanic uses his ears first," his father always said. But times change, and Morgan had learned to adapt while keeping the old wisdom alive. The Mercedes responds to his examination with a stream of data across the modern scanner's screen. Morgan translates the technical readout with practiced ease, but he still presses his ear to the engine, listening to its troubled rhythm. The car speaks to him in a language of subtle clicks and whispers, confirming what the computer suggests. "Fuel pressure regulators shot," he mutters, more for his own benefit than Jimmy's. And the injection control module needs recalibration. Simple problems for a complex machine, though the parts won't be cheap. Jimmy hovers nearby, alternating between working on his own projects and watching Morgan with poorly concealed curiosity. The younger man has never seen his mentor so focused yet distracted at the same time. "That's a third-generation M278 engine," Jimmy comments, trying to sound casual. "Don't see many of those around here." Morgan nods, appreciating his assistant's attempt at normal conversation. Twin-turbo V8, beautiful piece of engineering. He runs his hand along the valve cover, remembering simpler engines from simpler times. "Hand me the copper feeler gauge, would you?" The toolbox yields another memory as Jimmy searches for the gauge. An old receipt, yellowed with age, tucked into a forgotten corner. Morgan glimpses the faded ink. "Dinner for two, Blue Moon Diner, August 12th, 1973. He pushes it deeper into the box before Jimmy can notice. The afternoon light shifts as Morgan methodically documents each issue with the Mercedes. It's expensive machinery, designed more for comfort than accessibility. But beneath the sophisticated electronics and luxury appointments, it's still just an engine. A heart of metal and fuel, as vulnerable to time and wear as any other. "Mr. Hayes," Jimmy's voice breaks through his concentration. "That lady, the one with the Mercedes," she called, "wanted to know if we had an estimate yet." Morgan straightens up, his back cracking in protest. "Tell her it'll need the fuel pressure regulator replaced and the control module serviced. Parts will take a day or two to arrive." He pauses, considering. "And the front brake pads are getting thin. Not urgent, but should be addressed soon." Jimmy nods, then hesitates. "She asked specifically to speak with you." "About the estimate?" "Of course she did." Morgan wipes his hands on a shop rag, buying time. "Give her the rundown on the repairs." "Needed. Tell her I'll have a detailed estimate ready by closing time." The phone feels heavy in his hand as he takes it from Jimmy. Catherine's voice comes through clear and controlled, decades of corporate leadership evident in every syllable. "Morgan," she says, his name carrying the weight of 50 years. "I trust you've had a chance to examine the car." He focuses on the technical details, falling back on professional expertise like armor. The conversation stays carefully neutral, discussing parts and labor costs with polite detachment. But beneath the surface, other conversations whisper between the lines. "The parts will need to be ordered," he explains. "Should arrive day after tomorrow." "I see." A pause, filled with unspoken questions. "I suppose I'll be staying in Cedar Grove a bit longer than expected." Morgan's hand tightens on the phone. "The inn is comfortable enough. Mary Beth's kept it up well." Another pause, longer this time. "It's strange being back. Everything's different, yet somehow exactly the same." Morgan looks around his shop at the tools that span generations of automotive history. "Some things don't change much," he agrees, then immediately regrets the words. "No," Catherine says softly. "I suppose they don't." She clears her throat. "Will you call when the estimate is ready?" "By 5 o'clock, he promises, and the line goes dead. Morgan sets the phone down carefully, aware of Jimmy pretending not to watch. The diagnostic scanner beeps, demanding attention, its modern display a reminder of how much time has passed. He turns back to the Mercedes, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of documentation and diagnosis. The afternoon sun casts long shadows through the shop windows, highlighting the contrast between the luxury car and its humble surroundings. Morgan works steadily, each measurement precise, each note detailed. Because focusing on the mechanical problems means he doesn't have to think about the ones that can't be fixed with tools and spare parts. 5 o'clock arrives with the inevitability of a turning gear. Morgan has spent the last hour double-checking his estimates, though the numbers aren't what's making his hands unsteady. The bell above the shop door chimes, and he knows without looking that Catherine has returned. She's changed clothes, a simple blouse and slacks now, though still elegantly tailored. Around her neck, half hidden by her collar, a thin gold chain catches the evening light. Morgan's heart stops for a moment when he realizes what it might be. "I have your estimate," he says, reaching for the paperwork. His voice sounds strange in his ears, too formal, too forced. Catherine steps closer to his workbench, her eyes drawn to the old radio still playing softly in the corner. The same model that had been there in 1973, though this one's a replacement, the third or fourth since then. She reaches up absently to touch the chain around her neck, and that's when Morgan sees it clearly. The small gold locket he'd given her that last summer. "You kept it," he says, before he can stop himself. Her hand freezes on the locket. For a moment, the professional facade cracks, revealing the girl who'd danced with him in this very shop half a century ago. "Some things," she says softly, "you can't leave behind, no matter how far you run." The admission hangs in the air between them, as tangible as the evening sunlight streaming through the dusty windows. Jimmy has gone home for the day, leaving them alone with 50 years of unspoken words. "I recognized you the moment you stepped out of the car," Morgan admits, setting down the estimate. "Tried to pretend I didn't, but we were never." "Very good at pretending, were we?" Catherine's smile is sad, touched with remembrance. "I knew you'd still be here in Cedar Grove, in this shop." She glances around, taking in the familiar space. "When my car started making those noises just outside of town, I almost thought..." She trails off, shaking her head. "Thought what?" "That maybe some things happen for a reason." She laughs quietly, but there's no humor in it. "Listen to me. 50 years of running Fortune 500 companies, and I'm talking about fate, because my fuel injector failed in the right place at the right time." Morgan moves around the workbench, reducing the distance between them by a few careful steps. "The Catherine I knew didn't believe in coincidences. The Catherine you knew believed in a lot of things." Her voice catches slightly. "Dreams, possibilities, us." The word "us" echoes off the old walls, stirring up memories like dust motes in the sunset light. Morgan can almost hear the ghost of their younger selves laughing, dancing to the radio after hours, planning a future that never came to be. "That high school ring," he says, nodding toward her right hand. "You still wear it?" Catherine glances down at the simple gold band, its stone dulled by decades of wear. "Class of 73, it reminds me of who I was. Before you became Catherine Mills, CEO of Mills Technology Solutions." The words come out more bitter than he intends. "I read about you sometimes in the business pages, watched you build your empire from nothing." "Not nothing," she corrects him gently. "I had a foundation. Here, in this shop." She takes a deep breath. "You taught me that anything can be fixed if you understand how it works. I built my company on that principle." Morgan turns away, unable to bear the weight of memory in her eyes. "Some things can't be fixed, Catherine. Some choices can't be unmade." "No," she agrees, and he hears her step closer. "But maybe they can be understood." Finally, he turns back to face her, and for a moment they're both 18 again, full of dreams and fear and possibilities. The radio chooses that moment to play "Can't Help Falling in Love," and Catherine's eyes fill with tears. "I never stopped wearing the locket," she whispers, "even when I told myself I had to forget, even when I married Richard, even after the divorce, even when I told myself I'd made the right choice." Her fingers trace the familiar shape through her blouse. 50 years, Morgan. 50 years of wondering if I made the biggest mistake of my life that summer. The confession hangs between them, like a bridge and a barrier all at once. Morgan looks at the woman before him, not the teenage girl he loved, not the corporate success story he'd read about, but someone who carries both those people inside her, just as he carries all his own versions within himself. "Why did you really come back to Cedar Grove, Catherine?" She meets his gaze steadily, and in her eyes he sees the same courage that once made him believe they could conquer the world together. "Because some engines," she says softly, "never stop running." The estimate for Catherine's Mercedes sits forgotten on Morgan's workbench, the numbers meaningless now in the wake of their conversation. The evening sun paints long shadows across the shop floor, and neither of them seems to know quite what to do with this newfound honesty between them. Morgan moves first, retreating to the familiar territory of his toolbox. He pulls out an old receipt, the one he'd hidden from Jimmy earlier, and holds it out to Catherine without looking at her. Found this today. Blue Moon Diner, August 12th, 1973. Catherine takes it with trembling fingers. Our last dinner together. Her voice catches. You ordered the meatloaf. I had chicken fried steak, Morgan finishes, and we split a slice of Mary's apple pie. The silence that follows feels like a physical presence, heavy with memories of that final meal together. They'd both known it was ending, but neither had been brave enough to say the words out loud. The diner's still there, Morgan says, busying himself with arranging tools that don't need arranging. Mary's granddaughter runs it now, still uses the same pie recipe. Catherine smooths the receipt with careful fingers. I almost came back, you know. That first Christmas. I had my bag packed, was halfway to the airport. She shakes her head. Father had just invested everything in the company. If I'd left, then you'd have never built Mills Technology, Morgan finishes. He keeps his eyes on his tools, but his voice is gentle. Never revolutionized supply chain management, never created thousands of jobs, never learned who I could become. Catherine adds softly, but I lost something too, Morgan, something I've never been able to replace. The admission hangs in the air between them. Morgan thinks of the empty space in his own life, the place where dreams of a shared future had once lived. He'd filled it with work, with helping others, with being the person Cedar Grove needed him to be. But some spaces can't be filled. Catherine moves toward the Mercedes, her hand trailing along its sleek lines. I saw your name in a trade journal once, an article about independent mechanics adapting to computerized systems. They called you a bridge between old and new, said you were teaching younger mechanics how to combine traditional diagnostic skills with modern technology. Morgan remembers the article. 3 years ago, when the automotive world was starting to recognize that progress didn't have to mean abandoning the past entirely. Jimmy's generation needs both, he says. Can't just rely on computers telling you what's wrong. Got to understand the heart of the machine. The heart of things, Catherine echoes. She turns back to face him, still holding the old receipt. We were so young, Morgan. Did we ever really understand our own hearts? The question strikes too close to truths he spent decades avoiding. Morgan picks up a wrench, then sets it down again. We understood enough to know what we were losing. Catherine's breath catches audibly. She reaches for her locket again, a gesture he's beginning to recognize as unconscious comfort. And now? What do we understand now? Morgan looks at her finally, really looks at her, sees the successful businesswoman she became, the scared teenager she once was, and the complex, accomplished person who stands before him now. I understand that some choices shape our whole lives, he says slowly, and that maybe they're supposed to. Is that acceptance or resignation? Catherine challenges, a flash of her old fire showing through. Maybe both, maybe neither. Morgan gestures around the shop. This place, it's not just what I settled for, Catherine. It's what I chose to build after you left. It's who I chose to become. Catherine nods slowly. We both built something meaningful, just not what we'd planned. No, Morgan agrees, not what we'd planned at all. The silence returns, but it's different now. Less heavy with regret, more weighted with understanding. The old radio plays softly in the background, some modern song neither of them knows, and the contrast with their memories feels right somehow. Catherine places the receipt carefully on the workbench. I should go. It's getting late, and I'm sure you need to close up. Morgan nods, but neither of them moves. The moment stretches, filled with words they're still not ready to say. Finally, Catherine steps toward the door. Will you call when the parts arrive? First thing, Morgan promises. Day after tomorrow. She pauses in the doorway, silhouetted against the sunset. The inn's dining room is closed for renovations. Mary's granddaughter still serve good pie at the diner? Morgan's heart does that strange thing again, the same flutter he felt at 18. Best in 3 counties. Catherine smiles. A real smile this time, touching her eyes. Good to know. She steps out into the evening light, leaving Morgan alone with the cooling engines and the whisper of possibilities neither of them had expected to find again. Morning brings a fresh October chill, and Jimmy clutching his phone with an expression Morgan hasn't seen since the young man discovered his first successful engine rebuild. The shop has barely opened, coffee still brewing, when Jimmy practically bounces through the door. Mr. Hayes, you're not going to believe this. He thrusts his phone forward, displaying a business magazine's digital cover. That Mercedes lady? She's Catherine Mills, the Catherine Mills. Morgan continues wiping down his tools, maintaining a carefully neutral expression. That's so. She's worth billions. Mills Technology Solutions. They're the ones who created that supply chain software every major manufacturer uses. Jimmy scrolls frantically through the article. Started the company in 1980, built it from nothing. There's this whole story about how she revolutionized industrial logistics when everyone said a woman couldn't understand manufacturing. The pride in Jimmy's voice catches Morgan off guard. He glances at the phone, seeing Catherine's professional headshot. Confident, poised, every inch the successful CEO. The article's headline reads, Catherine Mills, the woman who changed how America makes things. Says here she just stepped down as CEO last month, Jimmy continues, oblivious to his mentor's discomfort. Handed the reins to her protege but keeps her position as board chair. Man, what's someone like her doing in Cedar Grove? Morgan sets down his tools with deliberate care. Even Billionaire's cars break down, Jimmy. But why here? She could have called a helicopter or something, had the car transported to any luxury dealer in the country. Jimmy's eyes narrow suddenly. Wait a minute. In this interview, she talks about growing up in a small town, learning about machines from... His voice trails off as realization dawns. Mr. Hayes? Morgan sighs, feeling the weight of secrets. Too long kept. Hand me that timing light, would you? You knew her before, didn't you? The timing light feels solid in Morgan's hands, a tangible thing to focus on. It was a long time ago. The article mentions her first job, working summers at her aunt's house, learning about industrial processes from a local... Jimmy's eyes widen. That was this shop, wasn't it? You taught Catherine Mills about machines, the memory surfaces. Unbidden, Catherine leaning over an engine, asking intelligent questions, her quick mind grasping concepts that had taken Morgan years to learn. She had a natural understanding, saw systems where others just saw parts. Jimmy sinks onto a nearby stool, still clutching his phone. But she left, went to California, built an empire. He looks around the humble shop with new eyes. Did you? No. All these years, did you know what she became? Morgan moves to the Mercedes, running his hand along its smooth lines. Followed her career in the papers sometimes. Watched her succeed. A ghost of a smile touches his lips. She did exactly what she always said she would, change the world. There's more here, Jimmy says, scrolling further. About her personal life. Married some tech investor in 82. Divorced in 90. No kids. Dedicated her life to the company. He looks up at Morgan. She never remarried. The implications in Jimmy's tone make Morgan's chest tighten. Ancient history, kid. Hand me that wrench. But Jimmy isn't ready to let it go. The article says she's giving interviews about her legacy now that she's stepped back from CEO. There's this quote. He finds it and reads aloud. Success has many ingredients, but my fundamental understanding of how things work, how to fix what's broken, came from a small-town auto shop where I learned that every system, mechanical or human, can be understood if you take the time to really listen. Morgan turns away, blinking hard. The morning sun streams through the shop windows, catching dust motes in its beams, just like it did 50 years ago when a young girl in a blue sundress first walked into his life. She's doing a whole series of interviews, Jimmy adds quietly, about her life, her career. The magazine says she's been declining interviews for decades, but now he hesitates. Now she's finally ready to tell her whole story. Morgan thinks of Catherine's words from the evening before, about engines that never stop running, about choices that shape entire lives, about understanding hearts as well as machines. "Mr. Hayes?" Jimmy's voice is uncharacteristically gentle. "What really happened between you two?" The old radio chooses that moment to crackle to life. The morning news reporting on Catherine Mill's recent retirement and her return to her roots. Morgan listens to the announcer describe her as a pioneer, a legend, a woman who broke barriers and built empires. They don't mention how her laugh used to echo off these walls, or how she could name every tool in his father's toolbox, or how she once dreamed of combining Morgan's mechanical genius with her business vision right here in Cedar Grove. "What happened?" Morgan finally says, his voice rough. "Life happened, Jimmy. Life and choices and dreams too big for a small town to hold." He turns back to the Mercedes, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of mechanical work, trying not to think about empires built and lives lived, and the way some successes can feel like failure when you count the cost. After Jimmy's revelation about Catherine's success, Morgan finds himself alone in the shop during lunch break, holding an undelivered letter he'd discovered in his old toolbox. The yellowed envelope, addressed to Catherine Mills in his younger self's determined handwriting, was never sent. The postmark date reads September 1973, 1 week after she left Cedar Grove. The letter's presence unleashes a flood of memories he's kept carefully damned for 50 years. August 1973 had been unusually cool for summer, perfect weather for working on cars with the shop doors open. Catherine had started bringing her lunch to share with him, simple sandwiches that somehow tasted better than anything he'd ever eaten. They'd sit in the partially restored Mustang, planning futures between bites. "We could expand the shop," she'd said one afternoon, sketching ideas on a napkin. "Add a proper waiting room. Maybe a small parts store, modern diagnostic equipment." Her eyes had sparkled with vision. "Your father's built something amazing here, but imagine what it could become with the right investment, the right marketing." Morgan had watched her draw their future, amazed by how she could see possibilities. "In everything. Dad always says to start small, build steady. But that's just it." She turned to him, excitement making her even more beautiful. "You already have the foundation, the reputation, the skills, the location. With business loans and proper management." She'd caught herself, suddenly uncertain. "I mean, if that's something you'd want." He'd kissed her then, tasting mustard and dreams on her lips. "I want whatever future has you in it." Another memory surfaces. Catherine lying on her back under a customer's Ford, learning how to spot transmission problems. She'd insisted on understanding everything. Her designer clothes forgotten as she immersed herself in the mechanical world Morgan loved. "It's like a puzzle," she'd said, eyes bright with discovery. "Every part connects, depends on the others. Just like in business. One weak link affects the whole system." Her father had arrived unexpectedly that day, horror evident on his face at finding his daughter covered in grease, learning trade secrets from a mechanic's son. The argument that followed still echoes in Morgan's memory. "You're meant for better. Things," her father had insisted. "Harvard Business School accepted you. You have opportunities most women would kill for, and you want to throw it all away for this." Catherine had stood her ground, grease still streaking her cheek. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm learning how things really work. Do you think understanding manufacturing processes won't help in business school?" But her father's words had planted seeds of doubt that would eventually bloom into their separation. The memories shift to their last week together. They'd driven to the lake in the newly finished Mustang, the summer sun setting fire to the water. Catherine had worn her blue dress, the one from their first meeting, And the locket Morgan had given her. "I got the final acceptance letter," she'd said, her voice careful. "Classes start in September." "Harvard's not so far," Morgan had replied, trying to convince himself as much as her. "We could make it work. I could visit on weekends, or maybe look for work in Boston." Morgan! The way she'd said his name had told him everything. Father's been promoted. The company's moving him to California. The sun had seemed to dim then, the summer evening turning cold despite the August heat. They'd sat in silence, watching the light fade from the sky, both understanding that something precious was slipping away. "We could still—" Morgan had started, but Catherine had shaken her head. "Could we? You have the shop, your father needs you here, and I—" She'd touched the locket at her throat. "I have to know what I can become." The final memory rises, unbidden. Catherine standing in the shop one last time, tears in her eyes. "I'll write," she'd promised. "Once I'm settled, we'll figure something out." Morgan had watched her walk away, the words he should have said trapped in his throat. Later, that night, he'd poured them into the letter he now holds, a letter full of promises, plans, and desperate hope. A letter that never left Cedar Grove. The shop's door chimes, pulling Morgan back to the present. He quickly tucks the undelivered letter back into its hiding place, but its weight remains in his chest. Through the window, he catches a glimpse of Catherine walking past, her elegant figure silhouetted against the autumn sun. She pauses, just for a moment, looking at the shop's worn sign, and Morgan wonders if she's remembering too. Jimmy's magazine article had called her a visionary, a woman who transformed American manufacturing. Looking at her now, Morgan sees both versions of Catherine, the girl who dreamed of changing the world and the woman who actually did it. He wonders, not for the first time, what might have happened if he'd sent that letter, if he'd fought harder, if he'd been brave enough to chase after her. But some questions don't have answers, and some letters are meant to remain undelivered, their words echoing only in the chambers of memory and regret. News travels fast in small towns, and by mid-afternoon, Morgan's shop has become the epicenter of Cedar Grove's most exciting story in years. The local newspaper from 1973, yellowed with age but preserved in the town library's archives, has been pulled out and photocopied, its grainy photograph showing a young Catherine Mills at her high school graduation. Mrs. Henderson is the first to arrive, ostensibly to check on her Buick's perpetual issues. "Did you know, Morgan?" she asks, settling into her usual waiting room chair. "All these years, did you know she'd become so, successful?" Before Morgan can answer, Tom Weber arrives with his pickup, followed closely by Sarah Miller's mother. The shop slowly fills, with familiar faces, each bearing the same mix of curiosity and excitement. "They're saying she's worth billions," Tom says, thumbing through the old newspaper. "Hard to believe she used to spend summers right here in this shop." Morgan focuses on Mrs. Henderson's Buick, though there's nothing really wrong with it. "Car's running fine," he says, hoping to redirect the conversation. "Just needed a minor adjustment." But Cedar Grove isn't about to let go of its biggest story in decades. Sarah Miller's mother steps forward, clutching her phone. "The business. Websites are all talking about her. Says she's doing a series of interviews about her life story, about where she came from." Morgan's hands tighten on his wrench. He can feel their eyes on him. These people who've known him all his life, who've trusted him with their vehicles and their stories. They're putting pieces together, remembering whispered tales of young love and broken hearts from 50 years ago. "I remember that summer," Mrs. Henderson says softly. "You two were inseparable. Everyone thought." She trails off, decades of small-town discretion warring with curiosity. The bell above the door chimes again, and Mary Beth from the inn enters, looking flustered. "Morgan, there are reporters asking questions at the inn. They found out Catherine Mills is staying there. They want to know about her connection to Cedar Grove." Morgan sets down his tools, feeling the weight of unwanted attention settling over his sanctuary. The shop has always been his refuge, a place where problems can be fixed with the right tools and enough patience. But some things can't be fixed by hiding in familiar routines. She was here, he finally says, his voice quiet but firm. A long time ago, she learned about machines, about how things work. Then she left and built something remarkable. That's all there is to say. But of course that isn't all there is to say. The old newspaper tells part of the story, the local girl who went off to Harvard Business School. What it doesn't show is the way she used to laugh in this very shop, the dreams they shared in the front seat of a restored Mustang, the promises that faded like newspaper ink. Jimmy returns from lunch, pushing through the crowd of townspeople. "Mr. Hayes, there's a TV van setting up across the street. They're asking about Catherine Mills' first job, about where she learned about industrial processes." Morgan looks around his shop, at the tools that span generations, at the faces of people who've trusted him with their vehicles and their stories for decades. The world outside is clamoring for a piece of Catherine's story, but here, in this space, the memories are still private, still sacred. "Tell them the shop's closed for repairs," he says firmly. "We've got work to do." The townspeople begin to disperse, understanding in their eyes. They've known Morgan Hayes all his life, watched him maintain their cars and keep their secrets. They know when to push and when to step back. As the last customer leaves, Jimmy hesitates by the door. The reporters, they'll keep coming. Now that they know, Morgan nods, picking up his tools again. Through the window, he catches a glimpse of the TV van, of ambitious young reporters hoping to uncover the human interest story behind Catherine Mills's success. They don't understand that some stories belong to the heart, not to headlines. "Let them come," he says quietly. "We've got cars to fix." But even as he turns back to his work, Morgan knows that Cedar Grove will never quite be the same. The quiet life he's built, the reputation he's earned, the peace he's found in honest work, it's all shifting like gears changing under stress. And somewhere in town, in a room at the Cedar Grove Inn, Catherine is probably watching the same story unfold, remembering the same summer, feeling the same weight of public curiosity pressing against private memories. The parts for Catherine's Mercedes arrive early the next morning, delivered by a courier who looks starstruck when he realizes whose car they're for. Morgan signs for the package, while Jimmy keeps watch for any lingering reporters outside the shop. "Coast is clear," Jimmy reports, closing the shop door, though there's a photographer camped out at the diner. Morgan unwraps the fuel pressure regulator, its pristine surface catching the morning light. Modern parts have a precision to them that still amazes him. No need for the subtle adjustments and careful calibration that older engines required. He sets it beside the old one he'd removed from Catherine's car. The contrast between them a testament to how far automotive technology has come. The phone rings, and Jimmy answers it with the professional tone he's been practicing. His eyes widen slightly. "Yes, Ms. Mills." "He's right here." Morgan takes the phone, conscious of Jimmy pretending not to listen. "Catherine." "Morgan." Her voice sounds tired. "I saw the news vans. I'm sorry about all this." "Not your fault." Small towns have long memories, and reporters have good research teams. She sighs. "I'd like to come by, to check on the car." They both know the Mercedes isn't the real reason, but Morgan appreciates the pretense. "Parts just arrived. I'll need about 2 hours." "I'll bring coffee," she says, and hangs up before he can respond. Morgan spends the next hour losing himself in the familiar rhythm of repair work. The Mercedes engine is a marvel of engineering, but at its core, it follows the same principles he's known all his life. Every part has its purpose, its place in the greater whole. Catherine arrives precisely 2 hours later, carrying 2 cups. From the diner and wearing sunglasses, despite the cloudy day. She's dressed casually for her, in slacks and a sweater that probably costs more than Morgan makes in a month. "Mary's granddaughter remembers how you take it," she says, holding out one of the cups. "Black, 2 sugars. Some things don't. Change." Morgan accepts the coffee, careful not to let their fingers brush. Jimmy makes himself scarce, disappearing into the back office with a stack of invoices that suddenly need urgent attention. Catherine moves to the Mercedes, running her, hand along its sleek hood. "How bad was it?" "Fuel pressure regulator." Morgan sets his coffee down and lifts the old part. See here, the diaphragm was starting to fail. Another few hundred miles, and you'd have been stranded. Like fate, Catherine murmurs, then catches herself. I mean, it's fortunate it happened. Here. Morgan turns to his workbench, unable to look at her. Catherine, I've been thinking about what you said, she interrupts, about choices shaping our lives. You were right, but maybe not in the way you meant. He forces himself to face her. How so? I chose to leave, to pursue success on my terms, built something I'm proud of. She touches the locket at her throat. But every choice has a cost. Every path we take means another we don't. You didn't come back here for car repairs, Morgan says quietly. No, she meets his eyes. I came back because I'm tired of wondering. Tired of carrying around what-ifs like spare parts that might have fixed something broken long ago. The broken part sits between them on the workbench, a tangible metaphor for intangible damage. Morgan picks it up, turning it in his hands. Some things can't be repaired. They have to be replaced. And some things, Catherine says, stepping closer, just need the right tools, the right understanding. She takes the part from his hands, her fingers warm against his. You taught me that. The moment stretches between them, heavy with possibility. Through the shop window, Morgan catches a glimpse of a reporter walking past, camera ready. The outside world presses in, reminding him that Catherine isn't just the girl who left Cedar Grove anymore. She's Catherine Mills, business legend, subject of headlines and biographies. Your car will be ready in an hour, he says, stepping back. Good as new. Something flickers in Catherine's eyes. Disappointment, understanding, resignation. Nothing's ever really new again, is it? She sets the broken part back on the workbench, but maybe it can be better, different, if we're brave enough to try. She turns to leave, then pauses. The reporter asked me this morning about my biggest regret. A sad smile touches her lips. I told him some answers aren't for headlines. The shop door closes behind her, leaving Morgan alone with a half-repaired engine and the lingering scent of expensive perfume mixed with diner coffee. He picks up his wrench, but for the first time in 50 years, fixing what's broken doesn't feel like enough. Evening settles over Cedar Grove like a soft blanket, the autumn sun painting the shop in shades of amber and gold. Morgan's just finished the final adjustments on the Mercedes when he finds it, pressed between the pages of an old service manual, preserved for half a century. A dried corsage, once white roses, now the color of memories. The shop door opens quietly. He doesn't need to turn to know it's Catherine. Car's ready, he says, still holding the fragile flowers. I know. Her voice is soft. Mary's granddaughter told me something interesting at dinner about my father's visits to Cedar Grove after I left. Morgan's hands go still on the corsage. He'd kept this secret for 50 years, protected her from a truth that seemed cruel at the time. He came to the shop, Catherine continues, moving closer, 3 times in that first month. Why didn't you ever tell me? Morgan finally turns to face her. She's been crying, though she's tried to hide it. What good would it have done? The truth is always good for something, Morgan, even if it hurts. She spots the corsage in his hands and stops short. Is that from the summer dance? He nods, carefully setting the dried flowers on his workbench. Your father made himself very clear during those visits, said he'd pull all support for your education if you came back, said he'd make sure no bank in California would give you the business loans you'd need to start your company. He had no right, Catherine whispers. But they both know that's not true. In 1973, a father had every right to direct his daughter's future. You had dreams, Catherine, big ones, dreams that needed more than Cedar Grove could offer. Morgan's voice roughens with old pain. I couldn't be the reason those dreams died. So you never answered my letters, never told me about his threats. Understanding dawns in her eyes. That's why you sent back the Christmas card unopened. You needed a clean break, needed to focus on building your future, not looking back at what you left behind. Catherine moves to the workbench, gently touching the dried corsage. I thought You'd stopped loving me, that you'd realized I wasn't worth waiting for. Never. The word escapes before he can stop it. Catherine, I built my company, she interrupts, her voice thick with emotion. Created something revolutionary. Changed how America manufactures everything from cars to computers. She looks up at him, tears running freely now. And some nights, sitting in my corner office looking at the San Francisco skyline, all I could think about was a small-town auto shop and the boy who taught me that understanding how things work is the first step to making them better. Morgan's heart pounds against his ribs. You succeeded, made something amazing of yourself. I did. She steps closer, close enough that he can smell her perfume mixed with the lingering scent of Mary's diner coffee. But I never forgot what I learned here in this shop with you. She touches his cheek, her fingers trembling slightly. Every system can be fixed if you understand what's broken. Catherine. He catches her hand, holds it against his face for a moment before letting go. What are you really doing here, in Cedar Grove? She takes a deep breath, squaring her shoulders the way she used to before tackling a particularly challenging repair. I stepped down as CEO for a reason, spent 30 years building something magnificent, but somewhere along the way, I forgot about the dreams that started it all. She gestures around the shop. Dreams that began right here, with a boy who could fix anything except a broken heart. And now I'm 70 years old, Morgan. I've run a Fortune 500 company, changed an industry, made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Her voice softens. But I never found another person who could look at something broken and see not just how to fix it, but how to make it better than it was before. The dried corsage lies between them on the workbench, fragile as the moment itself. Outside, the last light of day paints Cedar Grove in shades of possibility, while inside the shop, two people who've spent 50 years apart try to find their way back to who they once were and who they might still become. Some things, Morgan says quietly, take a lifetime to fix properly. Catherine's smile is warm and sad and hopeful all at once. Then it's a good thing we've still got some lifetime left, isn't it? Morning brings a swarm of media to Cedar Grove. The story has broken nationally, tech billionaire's secret past, the small-town romance that shaped an industry. Morgan discovers this when he arrives at the shop to find 3 news vans parked outside and a cluster of reporters checking their phones. Jimmy meets him at the back entrance waving a fresh newspaper. The contrast between the modern digital headlines on his phone and the traditional local paper feels symbolic somehow. They're saying it's like a movie, Mr. Hayes, Jimmy says, spreading out the Cedar Grove Gazette. The front page shows a split image, Catherine's corporate headshot beside a grainy photograph of the shop from 1973. Local boy, successful woman, reunited after 50 years. It's not a movie, Morgan replies gruffly. It's people's lives. The phone starts ringing before they even open. Morning shows wanting interviews, magazines seeking comments, Hollywood producers talking about rights to their story. Morgan lets them all go to voicemail. Around 10, Catherine appears at the back door, looking harried. She's dressed impeccably as always, but there's a tension in her shoulders that wasn't there yesterday. My PR team is having fits, she says, without preamble. They want me to do a formal statement, control the narrative. She sinks onto a workshop stool. Apparently, we're trending on social media. Morgan hands her a cup of coffee, proper shop coffee, not the fancy diner kind. Since when does Catherine Mills let anyone control her narrative? That draws a small smile. Since my company's stock price started fluctuating based on my personal life, apparently. She takes a sip of coffee and grimaces. Good Lord, this is terrible. Just like I remember. Some things don't change, but some things do. She pulls out her phone, showing him a business news website. They're calling it the Cedar Grove effect. Our story got out, and now investors are speculating that I'm planning to shift company resources to revitalize small-town manufacturing. The stock jumped 12 points. Morgan continues his morning routine, checking tools and preparing for the day's repairs. That's not why you came back. No, she agrees softly, but maybe they're not entirely wrong. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about taking a lifetime to fix things properly. She stands, moving to the Mercedes that's still waiting to be returned to her. This shop, what you do here, it matters, not just to Cedar Grove, but as a model for something bigger. Before Morgan can respond, the front door chimes. Sarah Miller bursts in, her mother apologizing behind her. Is it true? The little girl demands, looking between Morgan and Catherine. Are you really a billionaire? And did you really learn about fixing cars here? Catherine kneels down to Sarah's level, something softening in her face. I did, right here in this shop. Mr. Hayes's father taught me that understanding how things work is the first step to making them better, just like Mr. Hayes is teaching. Me, Sarah beams. I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller says, trying to corral her daughter. We saw the news, and she insisted. It's fine, Catherine assures her, still watching Sarah. You know, when I was about your age, I thought girls couldn't be mechanics or run companies. But in this shop, I learned that anyone can fix what's broken if they're willing to learn how. The moment is interrupted by a commotion outside. More. Reporters have arrived, and someone's tipped them off about Catherine's presence. Back door, Morgan says quickly. Jimmy, get Mrs. Miller's car from the lot. But before they can move, the front door opens again. Cedar Grove's mayor strides in, beaming for the cameras that follow him. Ms. Mills, such an honor to have you back in Cedar Grove. I hope you'll consider... His practiced speech falters as he realizes he's interrupted something genuine. Catherine stands and Morgan watches her transform. The warm woman who'd been talking to Sarah disappears behind the polished corporate mask he's seen in magazine photos. Mayor Thompson, she says smoothly, perhaps we could schedule a proper meeting to discuss any proposals you have for Cedar Grove's future. The mayor beams again, but Morgan can see the calculation behind Catherine's words. She's protecting something. This space, these memories, the fragile possibility of redemption they've discovered. After the mayor leaves, trailed by his media. Entourage, Catherine turns back to Sarah. Never let anyone tell you what you can't fix, she says quietly. Then to Morgan, I need to handle this. Give me 24 hours to clear the air. She strides out the front door into the waiting cameras, every inch the confident CEO. The reporters swarm, following her down the street, leaving the shop in sudden silence. Sarah tugs at Morgan's sleeve. Is she your girlfriend? Morgan watches. Catherine disappear into the crowd of reporters, remembering another young woman who walked away 50 years ago. No, Sarah. She's just someone who once learned the same things you're learning now. But even as he says it, he wonders if maybe some lessons take a lifetime to fully understand. Catherine's corporate phone buzzes for the dozenth time that hour, its sleek surface reflecting the afternoon sun streaming through the shop windows. She glances at it, sighs, and turns it face down on Morgan's workbench. Board meeting in an hour, she explains. Video conference. They're concerned about the direction of my legacy interviews, now that... She gestures vaguely at the newspaper headlines scattered across the bench. Morgan continues working on Mrs. Henderson's Buick, his hands steady despite the tension. In the air. Sounds important, you should take it. Everything sounds important when you're running a multi-billion-dollar company. Catherine picks up a wrench, turning it over in her manicured hands. Even when you're supposedly stepping back. The shop is quiet today. Jimmy's been running interference at the door, turning away reporters and curiosity seekers. But the pressure of the outside world seeps in through their phones, through the internet, through the weight of expectations and obligations. Mills Technology is launching a new manufacturing automation platform next quarter. Catherine continues, her voice carefully neutral. The team wants me in San Francisco for the rollout. Press conferences, investor meetings, the usual circus. She sets the wrench down with precise care. I'd be gone for at least 6 months. Morgan's hands pause over the Buick's engine. Sounds like you've built something that needs you. Does it? Catherine stands, moving to the wall of gratitude. I've spent 50 years building a company that changes how things are made. But here, she touches one of the thank you cards. Here you've built something that changes how people live. Morgan wipes his hands on a shop rag, buying time to steady his voice. Different kinds of impact. Is it, though? Catherine turns to face him. You remember what you taught me that first summer? About how every part of an engine has to work. Together? Catherine! Her phone buzzes again, more insistent this time. The board waiting, the future calling. Catherine stares at it like it's a bomb about to detonate. I have obligations, she says quietly, responsibilities, thousands of employees depending on the company's stability. I know, but I also have, she touches the locket at her throat, regrets. Opportunities I let slip away, dreams I set aside for other dreams. Morgan moves to his toolbox, pulls out the unsent letter from 1973. We all have those. Catherine takes the letter with trembling fingers, but doesn't open it. The mayor wants to establish a technical training center here. Modern equipment, apprenticeship programs, says it could revitalize the whole region. She laughs softly. He thinks having my name attached would draw investment. He's probably right. The board would approve. Rural Innovation Initiative makes for good press. She sets the letter down beside her phone. But that's not why I want to do it. Morgan feels the weight of possibility pressing against his chest. Why do you want to do it? Because 50 years ago, a boy in a small-town auto shop taught me that understanding how things work is the first step to making them better. She meets his eyes. And maybe it's time I came full circle. Her phone buzzes again. The board meeting waiting. The future demanding attention. Take the call, Morgan says gently. Some choices need to be made with a clear head. Catherine picks up her phone, but hesitates. Morgan, that summer, when we talked about expanding the shop, combining your skills with my business sense, we weren't wrong. We were just ahead of our time. She answers the phone before he can respond, walking out to the back lot where her Mercedes sits waiting. Morgan watches through the window as she paces, speaking in the confident tones of a CEO who spent decades in boardrooms. The unsent letter sits on his workbench, 50 years of words waiting to be read. Beside it, the wrench Catherine was. Holding still bears the impression of her fingers, old dreams meeting new possibilities in the afternoon light. Evening settles over the shop as Morgan finishes restoring a classic Mustang. Not his old one from '73, but the same model, same year. He'd found it 6 months ago, rusting in a farmer's field, and something about it had called to him. Now, it sits gleaming in the fading light, a bridge between past and present. The door chimes softly. Catherine enters, looking both exhausted and energized, the way she used to after solving a particularly challenging mechanical problem. The board approved it, she says without preamble. The Cedar Grove Technical Innovation Center. Full funding, corporate backing, everything we need to make it work. She pauses, taking in the restored Mustang. Is that different car? Same soul. Morgan wipes his hands, studying her expression. You said we. I did. Catherine moves to the car, running her hand along its polished hood. The board wants me to oversee the project personally. Said something about authentic connection. To the community. She smiles wryly. Corporates speak for good PR. And what do you want? Catherine turns to face him, her expression softening. I want to build something that matters, not just another corporate initiative, but something real. Something that combines what I learned here with what I've learned since. She gestures. Around the shop. This place taught me how things work. My company taught me how to scale that understanding. Maybe it's time to bring those lessons together. Morgan picks up a wrench, the same one she'd held earlier. Cedar Grove isn't San Francisco. No, she agrees. It's better, it's real. It's where people still understand that some things are worth fixing instead of replacing. She steps closer. Where some people never stop believing in second chances. The wrench feels heavy in Morgan's hands. The technical center. It's a good idea. The town needs it. The town needs you, Catherine corrects. Your knowledge, your experience, your way of teaching. She smiles. Jimmy told me about Sarah Miller, how you're teaching her the same way your father taught us. That's what this town needs. A bridge. Between the old wisdom and new technology, Morgan sets the wrench down carefully. And what do you need, Catherine? I need... She touches her locket, a gesture he's come to recognize as her searching for courage. I need to stop running from the best parts of myself. I need to finish what we started 50 years ago. Not just with the shop, but with us, the restored. Mustang gleams between them, its chrome catching the last rays of sunlight. Morgan thinks about the letter in his toolbox, about choices and second chances and dreams deferred, but not forgotten. I've spent 50 years fixing other people's broken things, he says quietly. Never quite figured out how to fix what mattered most. Catherine reaches for his hand, her fingers still soft, despite decades in boardrooms. Maybe some things don't need fixing. Maybe they just need time to find their way back to where they belong. Through the shop window, Cedar Grove's main street is visible, the old buildings painted gold by the setting sun. The town has changed since 1973, adapted and evolved while keeping its heart intact. Maybe, Morgan thinks, people can do the same. The technical center, he says, it'll need someone who understands both worlds, someone who knows about engines and economics. It will. Catherine's grip on his hand tightens slightly. It'll need both of us, if you're willing to try again. Morgan looks at their joined hands, his calloused from decades of honest work, hers elegant, but still bearing the strength he remembers. Different paths, different lives, but somehow leading back to the same place. We're not 18 anymore, he warns, but there's a smile pulling at his lips. No, Catherine agrees, we're better. We know who we are now, what we want, what matters. The restored Mustang sits ready for its first drive, a testament to the possibility of making old things new again. Morgan thinks about Sarah Miller's eager questions, about Jimmy's careful learning, about all the young minds that could benefit from both his practical knowledge and Catherine's visionary understanding. Well, he says finally, I suppose some things are worth taking a lifetime to get right. Catherine's smile is like sunrise breaking through clouds. Does this mean you'll help me build something new? Morgan reaches into his pocket for the Mustang's keys. How about we start with a drive, for old time's sake? The engine purrs to life, its restored heart beating strong and true. As they pull out of the shop, Morgan glances at Catherine in the passenger seat. She's wearing that same expression she had 50 years ago, part excitement, part determination, all possibility. Some dreams, he realizes, don't die. They just need the right moment to restart their engines. The changing leaves of Cedar Grove paint the town in autumn glory as Catherine and Morgan stand before the old Anderson warehouse at the edge of town. The building has been empty for decades, its brick walls solid but neglected, much like the dreams they'd once shared. Perfect location for the technical center, Catherine says, her corporate phone forgotten in her pocket. Close to the highway, plenty of parking, and enough space for both classroom training and hands-on work. She turns to Morgan with that familiar gleam in her eyes. Just imagine it. Modern diagnostic equipment alongside traditional tools. Students learning both the old ways and the new. Morgan runs his hand along the weathered brick. Anderson's boy's been trying to sell this place for years. Never thought it'd be you buying it. Sometimes the best future is built on forgotten foundations. Catherine pulls out a set of blueprints, spreading them on the hood of the restored Mustang they'd driven over. The architects can preserve the original structure while modernizing the interior. We'll have space for everything, mechanical training, computer labs, even a small manufacturing floor. The morning sun catches the gold of her locket as she leans over the plans. Morgan watches her trace the proposed layouts with the same enthusiasm she once showed, learning about transmission repairs. Some things, he realizes, never change at all. Jimmy pulls up in his truck, Sarah Miller bouncing excitedly in the passenger seat. The young man has taken the girl under his wing, teaching her the basics, just as Morgan once taught him. Now they're both part of something bigger. "Is it true?" Sarah calls out as she jumps from the truck. "Are we really getting a whole building? Full of cars and computers and everything?" Catherine kneels to show her the blueprints, pointing out where different workshops will be. "And right here," she says, "we'll have a special section for young mechanics in training, complete with tools sized for smaller hands." Morgan feels something shift in his chest as he watches them. The CEO who changed an industry, and the little girl who might change it again someday, connected by the same love of understanding how things work. The sound of another car approaching makes them all look up. Mary Beth from the inn is walking over, carrying a familiar pie box from the diner. "Thought you might need sustenance while planning the future," she says with a knowing smile. "Apple pie, still made from my grandmother's recipe." They settle into an impromptu picnic on the Mustang's hood, passing around pieces of pie as Catherine explains her vision for the center. It's not just about training mechanics anymore. It's about bridging worlds, combining the soul of small-town craftsmanship with the possibilities of modern technology. The board sees it as a pilot program, she explains, accepting a napkin. From Mary Beth, "If it works here, we could replicate it in other small towns across the country, create a network of innovation centers that preserve traditional skills while advancing technology." "And you'll stay?" Sarah asks, around a mouthful of pie. "To help teach us?" Catherine meets Morgan's eyes over the blueprints. "I'm not going anywhere. Some things are worth building slowly, getting right from the foundation up." Jimmy clears his throat. Speaking of foundations, he reaches into his truck and pulls out a new sign, one he's clearly been working on in secret. The lettering is a perfect blend of classic and modern. Hayes and Mills, Technical Innovation Center, where traditional wisdom meets tomorrow's technology. Morgan stares at the sign, at their names joined together the way they should have been 50 years ago. But maybe, he thinks, some dreams need time to mature, like wine or wisdom or love itself. Catherine slips her hand into his, and he feels the warmth of possibility in her touch. The autumn breeze carries the scent of pie and promise, of old dreams, finding new life in unexpected ways. "Well," Mary Beth says, gathering up the pie box, "I'd say this calls for a celebration. Dinner at the diner tonight? On the house?" Sarah claps her hands. "Can we sit in the booth where they used to sit when they were young?" The adults laugh, but Morgan notices Catherine brush away a tear. Some memories are precious exactly because they can't be recreated. They can only be honored by building something new in their image. The sign catches the morning light, their names shining like a bridge between past and future. Morgan squeezes Catherine's hand, feeling the strength of her answering grip. "Same booth," he agrees. "But this time, we're writing a different ending." 6 months later, spring returns to Cedar Grove. The old Anderson warehouse has transformed into a gleaming center of learning, its historic brick walls now housing a perfect blend of traditional workbenches and cutting-edge technology. But it's in Morgan's original shop where the real magic happens one quiet morning. Catherine stands in the doorway, watching Morgan teach Sarah Miller the fine art of engine timing, the same lesson he'd once taught her. The girl's small hands are steady as she makes the adjustments, her face showing the same concentration Catherine remembers feeling at that age. "Perfect," Morgan says, his voice carrying the same gentle patience it had 50 years ago. "Now listen to how it sounds. Every engine has its own voice." Catherine touches the locket at her throat, thinking about voices and time and the ways love changes without ever really changing at all. The morning sun streams through the shop windows, catching the new thank you card she'd helped Sarah make for the wall, this one decorated with both wrenches and computer chips. Morgan looks up, catching her eye. He's been wearing her father's old pocket watch lately, the one she'd kept all these years and finally returned. Time, they've learned, has its own way of bringing things full circle. "Ready for the ceremony?" she asks, though she already knows the answer. Morgan Hayes has never been one for public speeches. As ready as I'll be, he wipes his hands clean, then helps Sarah do the same. Still think we should let Jimmy handle the talking part. The people need to hear from both of us, Catherine says softly. The ones who stayed and the ones who came back, that's what makes this work. Outside, cars are already filling the new center's parking lot. Board members from Mills Technology, local families, reporters from national papers, all gathered to witness the official opening of a place that represents more than just education or innovation. Jimmy appears in the doorway, wearing a neat suit that somehow doesn't look out of place, with the smudge of grease on his collar. They're ready for you both. Sarah bounces excitedly. Can I show them how the computer diagnostic system works with the classic cars? Please. Catherine exchanges a smile with Morgan. They'd designed that system together, combining his practical wisdom with her technological knowledge. Like them, it bridges two worlds that only seemed incompatible. Morgan picks up his father's old tool belt, restored now, but still bearing the marks of decades of honest work. Catherine reaches for his other hand, her corporate phone silent in her pocket. Some calls can wait. Some moments need to be lived, fully. Did you ever think, she asks as they walk toward the center, that we'd end up here when you were teaching me about fuel pumps and fan belts? Morgan's hand tightens on hers. Always hoped, never quite believed. He pauses at the center's entrance. But some things are worth waiting for, worth getting right. The crowd applauds as they step onto the small stage. Catherine sees faces she knows from boardrooms mixed with faces she remembers from childhood. Sarah and Jimmy stand with the first class of students, young people who will learn to blend the best of old and new, just as she and Morgan have learned to blend their past and present. Morgan surprises her by speaking first. 50 years ago, in a shop just down the street, I learned that understanding how things work isn't just about machines. It's about people, about dreams, about recognizing that sometimes the longest road leads you right back home. Catherine feels tears threatening, but continues their joint speech. And sometimes the biggest innovations come from remembering what matters most, the wisdom of experience, the energy of youth, and the courage to bring them together. Later, after the speeches and demonstrations, after Sarah wows the crowd, with her knowledge of both computer diagnostics and traditional tools, after the reporters have gone and the future has officially begun, Morgan and Catherine return to the old shop. The evening sun paints the walls gold, just like it did that first summer. The radio plays softly in the corner. Not Elvis this time, but something newer that speaks just as truly about love and time and second chances. Morgan pulls out the letter he never sent, the one that's waited 50 years to be read. Think, it's time. Catherine takes it gently but doesn't open it. Instead, she places it in the center of his workbench and puts her father's watch beside it. How about we write a new one, together this time? Morgan looks around the shop that has been his life's work, at the wall of gratitude that now includes a photo of their technical center's first class, at the woman who left and came back and helped make everything old feel new again. Together, he agrees, and in the word is every lesson they've ever learned about fixing what's broken and building what matters, and the infinite possibilities of love that takes the long way home. They leave the letter where it lies, a bridge between past and future, and step out into the evening light. Behind them, the shop holds 50 years of memories. Ahead, the technical center glows with promise. And between them, their joined hands tell the story of how sometimes the best kind of repair is the kind that takes a lifetime to complete.